with the sort of gun birds for bases deal, which Churchill said he had no choice but to do, and perhaps he was right. But from then on, the American economic machine was moving towards Britain. But I think nothing compared to the last 15 years. This is, I think, where people say, oh, we've always had Ford, had Daimler, we've always had American companies here. But it's about the scale. And as we move to a digital world, that's a digital world which is owned by Americans. And as we move to from quoting companies, fully dominated by quoted stock market companies, to a world bigger, more private companies, the private equity world, that's where the Americans are really coming.
I mean, it is key because if we had Peter Hitchens on here, he would say that Brits British organised in 1941, they were also poor, and that effectively some sort of dependence in the United States. And that's why the Civil War started and evolved to European powers in 75, as to the USSR, hyperpowers, which they call the two rivals of the Cold War. I think that's true, but like you say, with this book, actually, we don't need to sort of dig and look back 80 years. This is really since the arrival of the World Wide Web in the early 2000s.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be like this. It's not as if, when some people say, well, this is happening all over the world, but I mean, we represent a third of American foreign investments. We've been taken over to an extent that France and Germany haven't, and yet they are still under the NATO umbrella. So it's not like we have to sell our businesses in order to have a mutual pact for military protection. They're different things. And it's one thing to believe in free trade, which the British and Americans and most of the Europeans do, but it's not the same as believing in free trade in our companies. We don't have to allow everything to be taken over. The French did famously when Mexico wanted to take over their big milk and yogurt company, Danone, is they label it as a strategic asset. And they say our strategic assets are protected from takeover, back off. And then Danone is still French owned. And it was a strategic asset, because one of its roles was to support local communities, to buy milk from small farmers, and to support yogurt makers locally. So yes, it's industrial, but the French recognise the importance of keeping it within their control. But it's not just a matter of pride, but it's much more than that. It's about where the profits go, and it's about who regulates those. So the danger once you've got a business that's owned in America is an enormous head office there across the Atlantic and the continent, making big decisions about layouts and priorities and regulation, whether they want that branch and the companies exist.
I suppose somebody might be watching this and might be sort of ultra-liberal person, to bigots they're talking about, putting Russian price pressure. There's a very material I'm a socialist. You do not want to be suffering profits to somewhere else. You want your workers to enjoy high labour standards, you want to collect taxes from companies operating and selling goods and services to the country. And I think there's a very important left wing. It's not entirely left wing, but I think over the last 20, 25 years, people from the left have thought centre left, amendments and everyone's here for centre left, centre. They would say, well, this is just not too early. It's very inclusive, it's wider, sort of sector.
Absolutely. I mean, my favourite question in the last 3 years has been, who owns that? And of course I've been using a computer or phone, and I've been using Google, American owned. It doesn't matter, they provide good information on this. And when I search who owns that company, it's amazing how often it comes to an American corporation. And just to give an example, we thought of during COVID, we really should be AstraZeneca the first to develop a vaccine. And yet at the end of the time, 2/3 of the vaccines were being bought. Almost exactly 2/3 were bought from American companies. So people turned Pfizer, which we just thought was a final years. It's not just any years, these were major American corporations. So I think there's much more that we can easily find out who's in Google and Facebook.
And the point about France, I think it's key.
just that we gave up the industry. We're still doing that. It's a process that's going on right now, and it ought to be the biggest of the current general election.
Maybe this will be the game changer in tech. Maybe I have to wait a little bit for that. There is a great study by tech firms, and this is another one that touched on politics or politicians like to say. Innovative, new technology, in touch. Again, going back to Jeremy Hunt, he said that $1 trillion company was going to be a tech giant. And you say the FTSE 100 was launched in 1984. And more tech firms than us today, just to be clear, for the most papers in the UK. That's a remarkable statistics. How did you work that out? What are you classifying as technology?
Well, that's interesting because if you look at the very few tech companies we've got left, they aren't really tech companies. I think you're probably right. We've got to trade on them too, and really they're using tech, but really the marketplaces aren't there. So in terms of pure tech companies, we've probably got the accounting firm, Newcastle, that's how they get on. So we're basically lost them all. But in many cases, I mean, DeepMind was a classic case, which is a very promising tech company, which Google was very cheaply as it turns out. I'm sure Google was a lot of time. So we allow these tech companies to that would be encouraged. Which he sold, and he said to me, by selling it now, I've got my entrepreneurship allowance, I'll pay a maximum 10% tax. If I carry on trading, I'll pay 40% more tax on trading profits. So it pays me to sell. So we've set up the tax system, which we have to sell. That's what the journalists are doing, so they've got a lot of companies who specialise in a particular niche, very often exporters, very often set up soon after the war, family businesses, with a extended community around them, and they wouldn't sell even for a profit because it would be socially unacceptable. They're embedded in their community, they've got jobs,
vassal state. So I suppose they're trying to condense it down now. I've got to that US capitalism, that's maybe themselves open to predatory buying business.
I think that that's substantially in that way, yes, maybe something more. But I mean, a vassal state, a vassal is someone who works at the direction of someone else, and I think that the British largely do. And I think a vassal is someone who works in order to enrich someone else, and I think in that sense the British do. But there's another difference within the British economy. We created a sort of vassal class, employees who are working at the minimum wage, having to live in places where it's expensive to live, having to get to work without costs, not having adequate insurance cover for when things don't go right. So I mentioned in the book James Bloodworth's book, which is an excellent analysis of how in the real world American capitalism works for Uber drivers and Amazon workers, and because he went underground for 6 months for each of 4 jobs to experience what it was like. But what he says is that it's all right as long as it's all right, but then if you get an injury, there's no one there to support you. And I think the British model after the war, and through the 60s and into the 70s, the British model was, and still should be, that we're there to support each other, and that we don't want to have people who are made destitute because things don't work out for them.
So effectively, a social democratic model is what you're talking about here.
There's certainly something less brutal than we've got with the workers in many of these companies.
So when you opened last election, you talked about a national investment bank and also regional investment banks. Is that also that you think, okay, we're trying to build an ecology a bit like Germany, that's something we should try?
Well, it depends how those will work. There's been constant talk of new banks, and then they're typically not funded by people very well, and not run by people who've got a clear vision of what they're trying to do. But yeah, finance is important, and I think we probably should have banks that support certain sorts of enterprise that are socially desirable. What you've got at the moment is banks who are motivated to support businesses that they're not worried about what the business does. They aim at themselves. So they're motivated to support the customers. Definitely a lot of collateral and can make interest payments, so that's natural to bank. So we should have a educational system for educators.
We take the co-ops. I mean, co-ops often operate, they can compete with more private firms. The problem is during the crisis, they struggle to access finance. If you're a large bank and somebody says one firm says I need 500,000
view that cash wasn't doing any good. Whereas in the other companies, they're always getting something in. It's not just the different companies as well, it's the processing companies that are working there. Companies like which pops up on the screen when you've touched your mobile phone or anything like that. So this is another example. So which way it started, bridges and pubs. It's the play you have to go through to make your payment without taking the ropes in the way.
It's very rare, as we spoke about Scotland, so you said you have to at least keep a certain amount of electronic structure should be physical cash has to be any sets as well. And so far, people have been cash have been the one out of March, where you know, the Tribunes and the Petty Bourgeois especially. And it's really interesting if you look at the sociological difference. If you go and hang out with my sister-in-law, was your cash in trade, right? Carpet fitters, builders, cash. If you were my colleagues here in media, undergraduates, it's all precious. It's a really notable sociological divide between petty bourgeois and the usual graduate class. And politically, actually, I had never thought about it again until we all go. Big takeaway, actually, is a really good history of US imperial relations. We absolutely need cash. We absolutely, if we're going to have a cashless system, it should be done in nation-based the UK.
Yes, exactly. We could have our own credit system. We did develop a company called Access. We were quite renowned to be able to take over by most of them. It could have been a strategy by government to say this is a strategic asset. We want to have a national-based credit card.
When was that taken over?
That was a while ago. It's
I
about
remember Access Pay, it was, that's my
25, 30 years ago. But they could have chosen not to do it. But there is no drive towards protecting national assets. It seems to be just a big hole.
We had that funny scenario a few months ago, Roger Prime being debanked, and him saying, I want to bank last resort, which might get the post office system, and they will give you a penny, 95 is coming out for public ownership of financial infrastructure. Strange world we live in.
Yes, the post office has just been taken over by a check bag, which is 500 years ago. I'm not saying for or against it, it doesn't seem to be considered as a strategic asset. It doesn't seem to be enough protections for ordinary consumers and market strategy.
On Amazon, you said about cash as a race to stay. On Amazon, 30% of online retailers contribute to which is crazy. We should just close it down. Should we say, no, that's it. I won't. What's the good solution really? I know you said we should alternative ways that you can tax it in the short term.
What to do about this is a big question. It's not an easy question. We've got to start recognizing the problem. That's what passive state tries to do, to recognize the extent to which we're moving around. Secondly, we've got to start measuring. It's an absurd thing to be trying to deal with amounts. We know there's numbers that are diagnosed what it is. So we need to have a proper measure so that all government departments should measure how much of their expenditure is made with companies of each nationality. It's not really a nationalistic thing to do, it's what other countries do. So start by recognising, then measure. Then I think we need to have a British policy, as other countries do. So conscious policy there. Then we need to adjust the tax system so that it's not so friendly towards debt and it's not so friendly towards foreign ownership. We need to make sure that tax is charged fully on companies from the country they come and reduce their transfer pricing. In terms of how we get there from problems that are already entrenched, well, that's difficult. We need a very powerful markets authority, mergers and markets group. At the moment, they're trying, they're too weak. Yes, they've put a incentivised to fill spaces in the market.
It is very good. I'm not gonna lie. I've bought so many things. You know, I've got a Prime membership. It is very good, but also I look at the British high street over the last 25 years, and it's just it's been smashed to bits. I mean, if you are like in London, Nokia, if you sort of this, you know, if you're in an area of London, you're fine. If you're in Manchester, towards the bookstores, you go to West Hall. 25 years ago, the high streets, no bookshops. Because the point is that people with those jobs need to live in London. You have to hold it in for things that are flying corners. There are some exceptions from my head and mind. Yes. One of the major cities like Edinburgh. Broadly speaking, it's about southeast and coast like to London.
Yes, so when you look at the wealth and convenience and so on, but it also starts to make an example. Somebody said, I'm not going to buy this because I want to support British companies, so I'm going to get more stocks. I said, well, so much disappointment. And all the stocks are owned by US private equity. So I said, well, I'll go to my local bookshop. And I said, good. So, in terms of Prime, you give that as an example where you've got membership. You've got that because presumably you get free delivery on those things and you get a certain number of free films and you get quite a lot of things bundled together. Now this bundling is goods together by the big companies is something that really should be challenged because what it does is it prevents small companies getting into each of those sectors. There's a formula to bundle stuff together, to attract European consumers to be benefiting from it. But it's very anti-competitive bundling those together.
So maybe a balance, but it's balance.
That has to be only through free delivery. You have to have a different service that people buy for their videos and for their music.
Interesting. Because in France, as I understand it, I think there's like a minimum price on books. I might be getting this completely wrong. I think they've got 3 times as many sort of independent shops as we do. Because basically, I'm not really saving that much by buying online is the point. So there are things like that, and I mean, I'm not going to talk about that. I think that's a very good thing not to do. But my point I was saying about what Amazon and what these big tech companies have really done to the UK high street in the last 2 years is terrifying. It's very bad. Actually, it's a big reason why Brexit. I think lots of people in lots of parts of the UK, south and south east, walk around with looks awful. And my worry is with AI applications that really changed over the last 25 years, they're just going to go stratospheric with AI, and it's going to be US owned AI. And all the stuff you're talking about here is just going to go a whole other level.
Absolutely. No, AI is American owned. And to use ChatGPT, I pay my $20 a month. And I think there is another, but I need to, because it's a good service. But I would be happy to pay £20 a month to a UK AI company. But all the things that I mentioned, the tax incentives and the structure of industry, the attitude of ministers, and the way the government buys often from US companies, all those things, it's unlikely British AI succeed in the general market. British AI companies in certain niches. But at the moment, these things stand, if they're successful, they will be able to
Final question. Is this all the legacy of Margaret Thatcher? She changed the political dialogue and concerned corruption and tried to embrace an American style capitalism.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Any discussion of British economy always ends
you want to be a private enterprise and make money, make films. In the water system, it's low margins anyway. It's quite hard to administer a certain product there. So I think this analysis can fit in with that perfectly well. And it's interesting you said that about Thatcher. If she saw this, she'd be aghast. Because I think she would be. That's what's fascinating to me now with contemporary British Conservatives, is that they helped create a model of political economy over the last 40 years, which they don't like.
Yes, they've encouraged us to model ourselves on the Americans, and instead of just modelling ourselves on the Americans, we've created a system that's welcomed the Americans in. So many of the decisions and regulation and reforms that are made in New York and Washington and in California. One of the extraordinary things is just this sheer success of California in dominating not just online businesses, but all sorts of businesses where you can get scale with the internet. And I think she'd be secure in that. That model wasn't in her vision at the time. Anyone's vision until 2000.
Yeah. This has been such a great conversation. I really enjoyed this. Personal state in America, London's Britain. I don't think it's a very left-wing book, but I think you might have some conclusions. Maybe I don't like saying that. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was my pleasure.
They're going to go through a period